Welcome to another exciting episode on Insight Africa. We're here at the South African Gallery, one of the world's most renowned galleries and the #1 gallery in Africa. I'm excited to show you around today.
I'll leave it open.
Wow, what another absolutely exquisite place. Are we walking towards the room?
We're going to go and look at the doorway.
Were you saying earlier that this is the door between yourselves and the Jewish Museum?
Well, this doorway is a marvelous link between a sister institution next door to us, right next door to the gallery.
Yeah.
This doorway was installed about 4 years after the gallery was opened, and it's called the Lieberman door. It's named after Hyman Lieberman, who was the first Jewish mayor of Cape Town.
Okay.
And when Hyman Lieberman died, in his will, he left a lot of money to be used to build what he called a useful public monument for Cape Town. And his trustees eventually decided to give that money towards the finishing of our building.
Okay.
So the room behind these doors, the big room in the center of the gallery, is called the Lieberman room. It's named after him. And it's a room that we only use to display South African art. And this is the kind of ceremonial doorway that you go through to enter the room. We don't normally open it to the public because of climate control issues today. But the door was carved and finished in 1934 by a sculptor called Herbert Vladimir Meyerowitz. He was in fact Russian-born, trained in Germany, and then came to South Africa in the early 30s with his wife, Eva Meyerowitz. She was in fact an important scholar of West African art, quite famous today. And he was given the commission to carve the doorway. He was teaching sculpture at the Michaelis School of Fine Art, which is just up the road. And the doorway really summarizes the story of the wanderings of the Jewish peoples, and in this particular context, how they found a safe haven in South Africa. So if we look at the door, to left and right, we have what are called the jambs of the door, left and right, and running up the left-hand side from the bottom, we know that there might have been Jewish people on the ships that came here with Jan van Riebeck. And ultimately, all these streams culminate in the central image above the doorway, where we see the homestead. We see Groot Constantia on the left and Morgenster on the right. And there's a Jewish matriarch in the middle who's giving suck to her child, and she's supported by two male patriarch figures left and right. And we see a land that is full of richness. We see people harvesting grapes and working the land. On the right-hand side, we have the Babylonian captivity. We have the Jews being expelled from Arabia when Islam was founded. We have also the Jews in Germany. Many of them were, of course, absorbed into Poland. And, of course, in Poland, we have, to the east of Poland, we have Latvia and Lithuania, which is where really the bulk of the Jewish population in South Africa comes from. So we have these two streams culminating in this happy scene at the very top. And then above us, we have a scene from the Old Testament, In the center we see a young woman carrying a pitcher of water, and she is giving it to an older man. And this tells the story of Eliezer, who was sent to find a wife for Isaac. And he'd been told that when he got to this particular place, that he'd be greeted by a beautiful young woman carrying a pitcher of water that she would offer him because he was so thirsty from his journey. This is a theme of hospitality to strangers. Okay. And it's very, very central to the Jewish religion. And that young lady subsequently became the wife of Isaac, and she became one of the great matriarchs of the Jewish people. And to left and right around them, you see all these other figures. Top left, you see a camel, and staring into the face of the camel is a portrait of a man who was working on the carvings in this gallery at the time. His name was Ivan Mitford Barberton, and Ivan Mitford Barberton and Herbert Meyerowitz didn't get on. Now the door is made of Burma teak, which is a kind of wood that they use in ancient temples in Southeast Asia. It is very resistant to insect attack. It weathers very well, and there's some old buildings where it's over 2,000 years old. It's still standing in good condition. And in the center we have relief carvings on the doors. We suspect that these weren't carved by Herbert Meyerowitz, but by his wife Ava, who was also a sculptor. And we have an image here of a Zulu warrior carrying a shield. We have a maiden who's holding a whip, and she's also holding onto some ears of maize or corn. And then below we have these little prancing figures, one carrying grapes, one carrying fish. And I've always been puzzled as to why these African themes were suddenly inserted into this very Jewish. So the role played by the Jewish community in the establishment of the National Gallery and the completion of our building is very, very important. And some of the very early donors to the collections of the gallery were, like Alfred de Pas, were all they were Jewish benefactors, without whom we would have nothing much to show. And he was, in fact, Hyman Lieberman was a much-loved mayor. I think in those days they used to elect the mayor every year, so he was elected 3 times in a row to be mayor between 1904 and 1907.
Wow, what an African world. Please don't go and keep watching. So now that you've got me on my knees, this is going to be a very good story.
Okay. This is a great story. Unfortunately, the sculpture should be on a pedestal. That's why we're still installing it. But it's one of the most loved works in the gallery, and was made in the mid-19th century by an Italian sculptor called Pietro Calvi. And it's a mixture of white marble and bronze.
Oh, is that bronze?
Black. It's a mixture of marble and bronze, the sculpture. So the skin, the face and the hands are made of bronze, and the rest of it is carved in white marble. And it weighs a ton. It really weighs a ton. But what is interesting about this sculpture, it's a portrayal of Othello, the Moor of Venice, from Shakespeare's famous play. And it shows a psychological moment when he's discovered the evidence, or supposed evidence, of his wife, of Desdemona's infidelity. And it's this expression of sadness and dismay. In fact, there's even a little tear coming off the eye there.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and of course, Shakespeare's plays were very, very popular in the 19th century all over Europe. So an Italian sculptor like this, Pietro Calvi, would have been very interested. But what is most exciting about this portrait, this portrayal of Othello, is that it is an actual portrait. It's a portrait of a man called Ira Aldridge, who was an African American who became the greatest exponent of Othello and he travelled all over Europe playing this role, and he played it in all the courts of Europe. In fact, he died in Germany and was given a state funeral. And interesting, this was given to us in the gallery in the 1930s. And what is interesting about it too is the fact that there's more than one example of this. I mean, they made, in the 19th century, they learned how to replicate sculptures. And there is another version of this sculpture in the Schomburg Center for Studies in Black Culture in Harlem, in New York. And it is the badge, the kind of the icon badge of that institution. And you can go there today and you can see they've got an exact similar sculpture of Othello, which is part of their collection. So it's a wonderful link between ourselves and an American institution that is foregrounding black culture in America.
Do you want to talk us through what we have here? This looks like a very exciting space. I wish I was a learner.
This room has been set aside as part of the exhibition, as a kind of extension of the exhibition. As you know, the title of the exhibition for the grade 12, or based on the grade 12 syllabus, is Studio, celebrating the life and works of South Africa, or the lives and works of South African artists. And we decided to make this into an activity space right next to the exhibition. Normally we have other rooms in another building where the pupils and learners can come and make art and have workshops. This time we decided to bring us right into the center of the show, so there's a strong relationship between the exhibition and what the pupils are doing. We're going to use this space as an activity space. We're going to have discussions, workshops, lectures, presentations here, also for adults. It's not just for children. So you can come back. And we've got audiovisual equipment here. We've made space on the walls so they can hang their own works on the walls of the National Gallery.
Wow.
So to make people feel that you know, they're also part of the institution and what is happening here. And the response to what is happening here has been incredible. We've had some schools, for example, Chris Harney High School in Kailicha sent a request to us a few weeks ago saying, could they bring 300 learners here? And they don't have art at the school. But so even the schools that don't have art are kind of coming forward. And one of the problems we have, of course, is funding the transport costs to get the learners here. But there are some donors and other supporters who are coming to assist us with that. So there's a kind of And essentially what she's doing is really appropriating that tradition of equestrian sculpture that you see, I mean, most epitomized, in fact, most forcibly perhaps by the example that we have in front of Parliament of Louis Botha, General Louis Botha riding on horseback. This is a tradition that goes back to, the equestrian portrait goes way back to Roman times and even earlier perhaps. And it became part of the rhetoric of Western sculpture. And essentially what Mary Sibande, as a black woman artist, is doing is subverting that whole tradition. She is reinventing herself as a rider. The horse was a symbol of power and speed and military confidence. And here she is representing herself in her alter ego, her persona, as Sophie the Maid.
Absolutely brilliant.
Wearing a Victorian style dress too, rearing up on this horse. Very, very powerful metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also just want to ask about this, because this painting is so striking. It caught me as I walked in the room.
Yeah, this is actually a photograph by Tanya Peterson, who is a young photographer who is reflecting on her ancestry. Her sort of, it's from a series called I Am Royal. As you know, many of the people living in the Western Cape are descended from exiles who were brought here by the Dutch, by the VOC. They were sent to live in the Cape because the Dutch were controlling Batavia and Indonesia at the time. So they exiled many of the leading royal families to the Cape.
Okay.
as a way of cementing their power in that part of the world. And Tanya Peterson's reflecting on her noble ancestry. This is a work called Self-Portrait from the I Am Royal series. One of the inspirations for the studio exhibition is also to focus not so much on artworks, but actual objects that come out of artist studios. And here we have 2 original palettes that were actually used by Gerard Sokoto in his Paris studio. And over there we've also got his easel, the actual easel that he used in Paris. All of these items were part of a bigger archive that came back to South Africa after Sokoto's death, and we keep that archive here at the gallery. So it's wonderful. I mean, the artist's palette in a way is a metaphor for that space where the mixing and the actual creativity, the messy part of art making goes on, where the decisions are made on the palette, you know, what color do I use and what do I mix and one thing and another. So one can read quite a lot into an artist's practice by actually studying their leftover palettes. And as we can see, Sokoto didn't like to clean his palettes. He used to pile paint on top of paint, on top of paint. So the exhibition also includes a number of objects which are historical artifacts now.
Again, enabling the full understanding. So
Yes.
I think it's absolutely fascinating to see the full picture again.
And a lot of people don't use artist palettes today any longer, but I mean it is almost, it's kind of the symbol of the artist, the painter at work, his palette. Yeah, is the artist in his palette, like we saw Katarina van Heermussen in her studio with her easel holding a little
yes.
palette.
Okay.
That is a kind of symbol of the profession of the painter.
Off bounds to the general public, so this is
Generally
a lucky viewing.
not the public are not allowed in here. This is because the spaces are very compressed and cramped. We also don't want damage to be done to the works, but we do sometimes allow people to come in.
So I'm feeling very privileged that I'm actually in here and that everyone's able to see the inside underground area with you.
A lot of people think that the curators only work with what they see hanging on the walls of the gallery, but this is really where all the work goes on.
Okay.
This is where it's really like a library. Everything is tagged and numbered, and there's a saying that you've got to, you know, if you can't find an artwork within 2 or 3 minutes, then your systems are not working.
Wow. Okay.
And it really, in a sense, this space will, I think, give the public some idea that a public art collection is something, if I can draw the analogy with an iceberg. When you see an iceberg floating in the water, you see a little bit on top, and then 90-something% of it is hidden under the water. And that's exactly what an art museum is like. 10% on view, the rest is all hidden away, and then it changes. Like the iceberg rolls around a bit, so things that are down here come up to the top and get seen again. So I'm going to show you how we store our collections.
Okay.
We have these sliding rack systems. Every painting has a number and a rack and a home. So when it comes off the exhibition, we know exactly where to find it after it's, and it goes back into storage. Storage areas are kept at stable humidity, stable temperature, and you know we monitor these spaces. We check them from time to time because we want to have absolute perfect conditions for storage. And we also, you know, we don't leave paintings on the floor. We raise everything off on blocks. We protect the frames. There's a lot of care and handling. We wear white gloves when we touch the artworks, so we don't leave fingerprints.
Perfect preservation.
All that kind of, these are what we call preventive conservation measures that we take.
The end of another exciting episode on Insight Africa. I hope you've enjoyed the visit to the gallery as much as I have. I remain your host, Charlene Miles. See you next time.